Good evening everyone, my name's Chris Nitso. Welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the Australian region tonight, the 2nd of February 2014. Tonight we're going to discuss ex-tropical cyclone Edna, what she might or might not do. We're also going to discuss a complex interaction in the Gulf of Carpentaria which may result in the development of tropical cyclone Fletcher. And last but definitely not least is a tropical low right now over Western Australia, which is showing some really interesting signs of wanting to form. In fact, let's start there. Tropical cyclone outlook for the next 3 days from the Bureau of Meteorology for the Western region says that the system really is going to be limited by the fact that it's actually approaching land right now, and so that's why they've given it a low or very low chance of formation. If we take a look at it on satellite, we can track it moving eastwards very rapidly here, and especially in the last 3 or 4 frames, it really looks like it's developed some really good structure to this particular monsoonal low. If we take a look at it on radar over the past 6 hours, you can really see how quickly it's pushing eastwards here. It starts up here near Troughton Island and then pushes in an east-southeast direction to be located basically east of Columbaroo now. And it's moving very quickly in that direction. Look, it is going to remain over water here over the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf overnight tonight. So while it does that, it may have that opportunity to reform into something a bit more significant than just a monsoon low. Look, everything's there. The structure's there for the system. All it needs now is a little bit of time over water, and it will ramp up probably very quickly, particularly overnight. Although the Bureau is suggesting that it doesn't have much of a chance of doing that, I wouldn't count it out just yet. Now, we saw how quickly the tropical cyclone Edna formed off Queensland. All it needed was about 6 or 12 hours. This is a very small system and is just as likely, if you like, to reform or form into something more significant. Look, at the moment, the current model guidance suggests that only the north side will have the gales required. Remembering a tropical cyclone requires gale force winds on more than halfway around the system. At this stage, the model guidance is all suggestive that it won't get it on the south side because it won't have time enough over water to do so. So if we look at the tropical cyclone formation probability, just there, right on the tip of the North Kimberley is where we see in the 0 to 24 hour period up until about tomorrow morning, we see just this area here, just the chance of a development of a TC. The Bureau of Meteorology across Northern Territory are in for a bit of a torrid 24 to 72 hours there with 2 tropical lows. We'll talk about the Gulf one shortly. Are expecting to bring some fairly severe weather throughout the region, and therefore the Bureau there has issued a severe weather warning for pretty well all Northern Territory coastal waters and a lot of the mainland as well in the northern half of the territory, due to the 2 tropical lows are going to be creating a very strong monsoonal squall line or monsoonal squall lines. And monsoonally heavy falls of rain as well. So we're going to see just a great weather situation from our perspective anyway, of extremely heavy rain, of wind gusts of here they say 85 kilometres an hour have been reported, but you could see winds of up to 100 kilometres an hour in these sort of squall lines. In this situation. So really a very active weather period over the NT coming up over the next 1 to 3 days at least, possibly a lot longer. So looking at very early tomorrow morning using the Bureau of Meteorology's Access Regional Model, we can see that the low lies here, Wadair's over here, and so the low is going to make landfall right around Wadair as a very significant monsoonal low. But you can also see that most of the weather associated with the low remains north of the system centre. And that continues all the way up until landfall, where even the Darwin area could be receiving some very heavy rainfall there sometime tomorrow morning and into tomorrow lunchtime. By tomorrow evening, the system goes inland, and we see that even though the heavy rain continues, it's not the extreme rainfall that you're going to be receiving tomorrow morning and around lunchtime. So by tomorrow afternoon, conditions do start to ease a little bit on that west coast. Now that particular system continues moving in an easterly direction all through tomorrow, and all through tomorrow and Tuesday, I should say, we actually then start to see a complex interaction taking place between this particular low and the low that's already in the Gulf. And we haven't talked about the low in the Gulf yet, so let's talk about that and then we'll talk about the complex interaction between them. So a tropical cyclone watch has been declared for the region between Kawanyama on the West Peninsula coastline and Port MacArthur on the NT coastline. So you can see the region in here on your map there. You can see also the expected track of the system. So 4 p.m. February the 2nd, it's located to the west of Borroloola and pushing in a pushing in an easterly direction out here towards Mornington Island, and then expected to form into a TC around about where it starts to drift westwards again. So we seem to have a little bit too much wind shear while it's pushing eastwards, but when it stalls, it looks like it's going to get some better conditions and is likely, or is more than likely, I should say, to form into a weak tropical cyclone. At this stage, it should remain as a At this stage, it should remain at the weaker end of the tropical cyclone category, so not expecting any more than about a Cat 1 and maybe very, very low 2. But look, at this, the latest model guidance suggests that this may not necessarily be the case. There is going to be a very complex interaction between this low and the low that we've just looked at. So let's have a look at what some of the higher resolution guidance has or says may happen. So here are our two lows. This is the one, this is using the European model. We can see the tropical low here over the northern half of, or northern parts of WA, western parts of the territory, and you can see it continuing to push in an easterly direction there. The model's probably got this just a little bit too far to the south. The system is likely to be just a little bit more into the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. We can see this tropical low located now to the south of Mornington Island, pushing east at a great rate of knots. Once again, perhaps maybe just a little bit too far to the south again. But look, it doesn't throw the model completely out of whack because everything it's showing can still happen here from here. So we've got some gale force, really strong gale force winds here around Bonaire, pushing even up to just south of Darwin. We've got these gale force northwesterly winds, but once again the big issue with the system in the Joseph Bonaparte is it may not have the gales on its south side, and that's what might hold it back from being named. On the Gulf of Carpentaria system, it's very much monsoonal, so we can see here very strong winds well to the north, but nothing really to the south, and not much wind around its centre. A bit like what Edna was earlier, and a lot like what Dylan was for most of its life cycle. And as we head towards the Monday afternoon period, we can see that the Gulf of Carpentaria low actually goes as far as making landfall here on the West Peninsula. And we also see the Northern Territory low continuing to push eastwards fairly quickly. Now this is about as far east as the Gulf of Carpentaria low will go. We can see here gales hitting the West Peninsula. And what we see then is we see that the Gulf low sort of stalls right along that western coast and then starts to push in a westerly direction, whereas the NT low continues pushing in an easterly direction. And as we head towards Tuesday afternoon, we see that the two systems are starting to interact with each other here, and they're starting to create a broad monsoonal type low feature right here. So you can see this is the Gulf low, this is the NT low, and they're doing a bit of a dance with each other on Wednesday morning. And then what will happen is one dominant low will come out of this, and the model today is predicting that the NT low will become the dominant one. And we can see here gale force winds on the north side really maintaining its structure, the Northern Territory low, as it pushes in an easterly direction. But the big thing to note here is that this particular model keeps the low inland and doesn't get it onto the water. So at this stage, we would expect that based on that guidance, it would not become a cyclone. But really, folks, it's very touch and go as to whether it can get itself offshore and whether it can actually become a cyclone. Because all it needs is probably 12 to 18 hours here offshore, and it will become a cyclone. So it's very, very close. It's a very touch and go situation. Looking at some of the wind shear conditions on Tuesday and on Wednesday, we see that on Tuesday we've got excellent wind shear conditions in the southeastern Gulf of Carpentaria. We've got a lot of wind shear in the western Gulf of Carpentaria. And then as we head towards Wednesday, we see that that wind shear remains very low, but in the southeastern Gulf only. In the western Gulf we have a lot of wind shear, so the values here of wind shear are going to be too high for a tropical cyclone. So it needs to remain very coastal or out here in the southeastern Gulf if it wants any chance of forming into a cyclone. If we have a look at things like relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, we really don't have an issue. The Gulf is moisture laden throughout its entirety, so we have a lot of moisture, no issue with keeping a tropical cyclone's convection going. So giving you a look at the GFS scenario, very similar sort of byplay happens between the two systems as we head to Tuesday morning. We see the NT system pushing east. We see the Gulf system really stalling right along the west coast of the peninsula. We see the west coast peninsula low pushing back into the Gulf. We see the NT low continuing to push eastwards on Tuesday night. And Wednesday morning, we really see the interaction beginning between these two systems, although in all fairness, the GFS doesn't push the NT low as far to the east, and so we don't get that almost Fujiwara type effect between the two systems. It's what we call the little dance between two lows. When two lows interact with each other, they get slingshotted. Sometimes they get slingshotted, and so that's what we call the Fujiwara effect. And we're not seeing anywhere near as pronounced effect of that here in the GFS modelling. We see that the systems remain apart from each other, but they really do impact on each other's ability to develop, and so really it is touch and go as to whether it can make TC status. It's too close to call and it's too close to land to take any risks, so the Bureau have definitely done the right thing there by at least issuing an alert, a watch for that particular part of the coastline. In the longer term, we expect that these systems will push back to the west, back towards the Northern Territory WA border, and then possibly in the longer term back towards the Pilbara coast. So as we head towards days 8 to 10, we can see in the GFS model guidance that we have the system pushing back down here. Now, it's going to be touch and go as to whether the system gets off the coast or whether the system remains a coastal hugger. Remember, we've had a couple of these now that have been very close to the coast that really haven't developed, and this could be another one. So once again, we could be seeing some very, very dramatic high rainfall figures over the NT and then over WA in the very long term. Similarly, on the Euro, we can see that by next weekend we have the system pushing west into the Kimberley region. Alright, Queenslanders, here's ex-Cyclone Edna. She's moved in a northwest to northerly direction over the past 24 hours, and she's located out here basically to the east of about Cardwell, and will now continue to move in a northeasterly direction away from the Queensland coast over the next day to 2 days. And we can see here that as we head towards Monday morning, the system lies well out here in the northern central Coral Sea. We get some gales coming in from the north, some near gales in from the south, so there is a chance there of reformation even as early as Monday of the system, believe it or not. We have an interaction here over a broad and deep monsoonal trough between two circulations, and eventually one will become dominant as it heads in an easterly direction. Now we see that the northernmost circulation is likely to be dominant, and that will still be then considered ex-tropical cyclone Edna. So if they do rename it, it will be Edna again, so it won't be a different name. And as we head to Tuesday morning, we see the system tracking in a southeast direction. Still see gales far removed from the center of the system in the south, but gales really are trying to wrap around in the north and the eastern quadrants. So Tuesday night we see the system not quite making cyclone status, but you could argue, based on what it was named for earlier, you could argue that it's more a cyclone now than it ever has been on the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So we see the system pushing in a southerly direction, but then what happens is we get a big ridge that pushes in underneath the system and halts that southeasterly motion. And so what we see as we head towards Wednesday afternoon and night is we see that the system will begin to slow down its southeasterly motion and may actually intensify slightly at the time, and we then see a track back to the west. So as we head towards Wednesday, Thursday, we will start to see that track back to the west according to current guidance. Now what we do see also though is an enhancement of vertical wind shear as that period progresses. So while it starts to track to the west, we also start to see a lot more wind shear. So let's have a look at the wind shear values by Friday morning as the system pushes west towards the Queensland coast. The shear values increase remarkably here. You can see here, look at this orange. Orange is 40 knots plus of wind shear. So the eastern and central and northern coral seas look great, but as it heads towards the western coral sea, it's got a mountain of shear to get through. And if that mountain of shear doesn't abate, doesn't move south, doesn't get out of the way, that shear will absolutely kill whatever is left of Edna at that point in time. So it's at this stage, look, most of the guidance is suggesting that that shear will be there. This is the projection from the GFS model at the same time. You can see that shear anywhere south of about Bowen to Mackay, anywhere south of that is just a mountain of shear for this thing to get through, and it just can't get through that. And so that's why the low-level circulation center may continue west, but really the middle and upper levels will be sheared away to the southeast. So just to look at the upper levels, what we can see here is that we have a big upper level high out here to the in the far eastern coral sea, or the southeastern coral sea. Now that upper level high would seek to push anything in this direction here, the southwest, but we also have an upper level trough amplifying over Queensland at the same time, and that's going to try and push things southeast. So we're going to have two different steering influences on the system. So the system will want to track west, and then as it tracks west, the system will want to push southeast. The great news about this situation though is that even though the system really doesn't look like much once that wind shear catches it, it does continue. The low level circulation center washes out into a trough, and that trough continues to push westwards into the Queensland coast, and we can start to see some pretty decent light to moderate rainfalls over a number of days here, pushing onto the Queensland coast, really anywhere from northern New South Wales into northern Queensland. So look, there's a silver lining there for everyone, that even though it's not going to be a tropical cyclone or a really strong tropical low, it is likely to still bring some rain if it adopts that track. Now there is still some uncertainty there as to whether it will push west. Some of the guidance continues to push it southeast towards New Zealand, and therefore not affecting Australia ever again. But really at this point in time, this is the highest percentage scenario, is that it does push southeast, but eventually catches a ride on a ridge back to the west, and then as it pushes closer to the Queensland coast, starts to disintegrate because of vertical wind shear, and what will be left is a trough system in the lower levels, pushes onshore and creates a fair bit of rain for the eastern half of Queensland, once again from about Cairns south to the northern New South Wales coastline. So fingers crossed that that scenario plays out. If we take a look more at the ensemble guidance here next Friday, we see that that Coral Sea tropical low is on the ensemble guidance a lot closer to Queensland than on the deterministic guidance from the GFS. So we actually see a higher percentage scenario chance of this actually making landfall as a stronger tropical low on the GFS than in the European. So in the European, we see it coming onto the coast as a broad trough system. On the GFS, we see it as a fairly strong tropical low, possibly even a weak tropical cyclone as it comes back towards the coastline. However, one thing I need to caution you with the GFS model, and I caution you all the time about this model, is that it underplays the effect of wind shear on tropical systems. So be aware that, you know, sometimes on the GFS model it gets to plow through 30 or 40 knots of wind shear, whereas in the real world a tropical cyclone can't do that. So looking further afield to next Saturday on the GFS ensemble, we see that we have a system making landfall around the St. Lawrence area. But once again, just remember, it has a lot of stuff to get through to get to that situation. So we really can't see this happening just yet unless we get some clearer guidance on what happens with that wind shear. We really can't see this scenario happening. But look, it is being modelled by a lot of the GFS ensemble, and so we probably need to pay attention to it. So that's in stark contrast to the European, which has this basic broad trough on the Friday night, Saturday coming back onto the Queensland coast, as opposed to a tropical low or cyclone hitting the coast. This seems a more plausible scenario. The GFS model seems a more unlikely scenario. But really, both need to be taken seriously. We need to be watching both of those as we head towards later in the week and into next weekend. So for the next 4 days, we're going to see some extreme rainfall here on the West Peninsula, southeast Gulf of Carpentaria. We've got two lows that are going to be playing with each other out here. We've got this that could become a tropical cyclone and just loiter in the region there for a couple of days. So we've got a situation there where we could see prolonged heavy rainfall. We should see some heavy rainfall from about Cairns northwards as well, with some moderate to heavy falls anywhere north of about Townsville, and also some moderate falls along the central coast. As we head to the Northern Territory, we're going to see a lot of rainfall in the far north coast, definitely on the western coast, as we get this tropical low near Columbaroo continues to push eastwards, especially tomorrow. We're going to see some very heavy rainfall in that region. And then also in the northern Kimberley and pushing into the central Kimberley region of WA. From the 6th of February through to the 9th of February, we're going to see extreme rainfall in the Gulf starting to push back to the west towards the Northern Territory Central region, and that's associated with what could become TC Fletcher, and as it pushes back towards the west, we'll see that rainfall pushing back into the central parts of the Northern Territory. We're going to continue to see just a raging monsoon, giving this northwestern top end coast and the northern top end coast a drenching over that 4-day period. And we're also going to see more rain for the North Kimberley and pushing into even the eastern Pilbara, believe it or not, with some light to moderate falls over the Queensland coast, remembering that tropical cyclone or Edna or whatever may be left of tropical cyclone Edna. Most guidance has her pushing back to the west, and so we might start to see towards the end of that 7-day period just an increase in rainfall here on the coastal fringe, especially if it becomes a bit of a trough system as it pushes back to the west. We'll see a big increase here in rainfall right along the coastal fringe. Nothing too much for inland Queensland on the way over the next 7 days, unfortunately. So no good news there. But you know, we live in hope that whatever Edna might produce might come further west once it does hit the coast and bring in some more rainfall. I know central Queensland got a little bit of rain out of tropical cyclone Dylan, and so they'd be hoping for a little bit of follow-up coming now in the next week or two. But at this stage, for this week, it doesn't look like it's coming just yet. Also, unfortunately for northwestern parts of Queensland, because of the tropical cyclones pushing more, or the tropical lows pushing more west than south, we are unlikely to see too much heavy rain seeping into this region. So going to see some showers and storms, but really nothing in the way of drought-breaking monsoonal type rain periods for you guys. So I know there's people out here who have had all of about 100 mils in 12 months. So it's a very, very dire situation here for some of our pastoralists. And unfortunately there's not all that much great news, but as I say, you should hopefully get some showers over the next 4 days. Anywhere north of about Mount Isa should see some rain at least, we're hoping, but really nothing drought breaking. Thanks for watching tonight, folks. We'll have another update on the 3rd of February. Good night.